Now you should be able to hear me.
Good. And can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, Mark.
Awesome. Good. Nice to
Nice
meet
to
you.
see you.
Nice to see you. How you doing? Where are
Good.
you? Where are you right now?
Uh, I'm at home in my home studio in Bath, New Hampshire.
Cool.
You know where Bath is? It's
Yeah.
up on the Connecticut River,
Okay.
um, about an hour and a half from the headwaters where you've probably paddled, but
Okay.
yeah, it's just across the border from Vermont. I live on a section of the river that they call the Narrows because it's where the Connecticut meets the Ammonoosuc River.
Great.
And it's yeah, I was living for a while in after my wife passed. I was living in the town of Thornton, which is a bit closer to Mowgli, but uh, I, I had because I had to downsize. Um, I was living in a condominium, and I found that condominium life was not for a country boy like me.
Fair enough.
I didn't like people looking over my shoulder all the time saying,
Yeah.
I don't like that carousel horse that you've got out on your deck. You got to get rid of that. And so this was in the middle of COVID,
Hmm.
and we had this spike in real estate values, which has continued on, unfortunately. But I mean, unfortunately, if you're somebody young trying to buy a home,
Right.
um, like my son Zach wants very much to get a home, and I think he feels like he's priced out of the market these days.
Yeah, I think that's a common feeling for a lot of people.
Yeah. So when my condominium doubled in value in less than 2 years, I put it on the market and in one day sold it and found uh, this estate sale up in. I knew I was going to have to go north to find something that was more affordable,
Hmm.
and I found this little place, and it looks out on the Connecticut River, and so I have a river view, but I don't pay riverside taxes because I have a little town road that goes between me and the river.
Yeah.
So it's from a practical point of view, it's the perfect thing for somebody who's living on a shoestring, after having had a wonderful life, you know. So, um, well, I need to start from the very beginning with you, Mark. Uh,
Okay.
I'm gonna introduce you first. I'm
Sure.
speaking with Mowgli brother Mark Popinchalk, who I don't know if you're at the Hayden Planetarium today because
Not right now. No.
holiday, but um, I was very excited to hear that not only you were interested in doing this podcast, but um, that you were working as an astronomer at the Hayden, and something of which I am a huge fan, and I'll bet a lot of Mowgli compatriots are as well. Um,
Yeah.
and not only that, you're a member of a very distinguished family.
Infamous even.
uh, tell
Yeah.
us how you came to Mowgli, Mark.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm joining you today from Brooklyn. I live in Dimas Park, which is a neighborhood in Brooklyn. It feels very suburban compared to the rest of the city, but I'm one block from the subway, and that subway takes me to the American Museum of Natural History, where the Hayden Planetarium is. And so I'm an astronomer at that museum. Um, and so I am also a Popinchalk, like he said. I am Michael Popinchalk's son. And so the Popinchalk, the generation above me consisted of a lot of brothers, and so a lot of them went through Mowgli, Andrew and Paul, at the same time, and then Andrew stayed on for a while, being the trip master, And then my father Michael was also there as a counselor for several summers. My other uncle Sam was there as a camper, and like I think is the only one of those brothers who went through Den and like was actually a graduate of the camp, while most of the rest of us were counselors at one point or another.
Yeah. So now, unlike many of the other brothers and sisters within the Popinchalk family,
Mhm.
your dad spent much of his professional life overseas.
Correct. And because of that, so did I. And so what happened was my dad was getting his I think it was a master's or an associate at that point at Plymouth State in education, and he worked and he'll correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe he worked as a principal effectively at a middle school for a couple years, and I think he was still working the summers at Mowgli, because the story is that he met my mother one summer. My mother is British. She came to the United States to work with a student in New Hampshire, and they met. And the story is that my dad actually proposed wearing a Mowgli uniform, because his staff in his staff uniform, he apparently proposed. Um, but they decided, being from two different countries, why live in either of our countries? Let's go abroad. And so they both knew they wanted to do education. And so they started working at what are called international schools,
Mhm.
which are English language, American curriculum schools all around the world. Often when there's a large American expat population. And so they started in Tanzania, and then my dad got a job as a principal in Italy, where my sister and I were born. We lived in Genoa, Italy for 4 years. I was only 6 months old when we moved to England for 5 years. And then I, at all these places, my parents were teachers or administrators at these schools. But effectively, my elementary school was in Trinidad and Tobago, my middle school was in Bangladesh, and my high school was in Egypt.
Wow.
Yeah.
A man of the world.
And so what would happen is I would come back to Connecticut, visiting family, because my dad is Popinchalks. They all grew up in Connecticut. Come back visiting family, and my cousin Dan would, at a certain point, disappear for half the summer. And I'd be like, "Where's Dan gone? I want to hang out with Dan." He's like a year and a bit older than me, and he was at Mowgli. And so my introduction to Mowgli wasn't like, "Oh, what a beautiful place." It was, "Oh, this place is taking my cousin Dan away. How am I supposed to see him this summer?"
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I graduated, or I went to after high school, went to Wesleyan University in Connecticut again to be close to family. And during those summers, I was like, "Oh, what could I be doing?" And Mowgli came up, and it was the best decision I've ever made to spend my summers at Mowgli
So
as a
when
counselor.
did, what year would you have started at Mowgli?
So I think I was first a senior staff member in 2011, and then I did the back half of the summer in 2012. I was doing by that point, I declared an astronomy major, and so I had to do a summer research program,
Uh-huh.
and that was my first chance doing research at Vassar College. But I knew that that ended in time, that I could hoof it up back to camp for the last 2 weeks and get to see like crew day and stuff. So
Nice.
I caught the end of the summer 2012, and then I did all of summer 2013. So I got 3 years as a counselor.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So not as a camper, but as a strictly as a counselor, like your dad. I mean,
Exactly.
he
Yeah.
came as a counselor as well.
Yeah. And
I,
in fact, there was a bizarre moment where it was like 30 years to the day that he was a counselor. Uh, I was the counselor to a camper whose father was a camper to my dad. And so we
huh?
had these two generations of counselors and campers
Wow.
existing over 30 years,
Huh. Huh.
which is again one of the power and beauties of Camp Mowgli.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was I mean, I guess that was sort of unexpected that you that you came, even though there were all those connections.
Yeah, I think it was like deciding that's what I wanted to do. I'd done I am an Eagle Scout. I did Boy Scouts throughout that entire international career because there is good support for international Boy Scouts in that sense.
Right.
Um, but I think, and I like being outdoors was great, but I think it was just like this was a clear-cut thing, and the education side of it, of working with young students and getting a chance to engage with them and learn from them, really set up a lot of my career choices as well. Because after that last summer of 2013, I went to New York without a job, without a clear goal of what to do, and my first job was this part-time role at the Museum of Natural History in the education department. And I think it was purely because of my Mowgli experience that they hired me, because they had seen that I did work with elementary and middle school age students because of Mowgli. And that part-time role turned into a full-time role, which then turned into the PhD I have now in astronomy, in a way, because of the connections I made through the museum.
Now, how was it that you uh, developed your interest in astronomy?
Yeah, good question. I would say, I think part of the reason I chose Wesleyan University is because it has a big telescope in the middle of campus. And it's not, look, Connecticut, the Northeast is not a good place to have a telescope. It's way too
Ah,
cloudy.
right.
It's not good. But there was one there. And so even if you only had a clear night, 1/3 of the nights, it was worth it. I think that uh, in terms of astronomy itself, I think it was definitely like brought to life in college. But I think science and some of the science teachers I had growing up were really special to me, and were able to kind of encourage a curiosity around the world, or around about the world around me. And I definitely want to think of my teachers in that way, as bringing that to light. And that was one of the priorities I had when I was at Mowgli. Was I tried to bring back the science ribbon for the summers that I was there, and the nature ribbon, or I guess it was called the nature ribbon. But
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, I really want to make sure that I do this while I'm here.
Huh.
Yeah.
So so you had had an interest in uh, obviously the outdoors and astronomy. How was it that you focused in on astronomy, though?
I think it's just the coolest, isn't it? It's just
It
so
is
cool.
pretty cool.
It is so cool. Um, Again, I think I had a very good physics teacher in high school who encouraged that. And so I think I knew going into college it would be physics or astronomy, and then that was what I leaned to in astronomy. I think what's so great about astronomy is that it's uh a way to experience the universe outside of our kind of human experiences. And I'm not saying that I know what a star feels like to be alive or anything like that, but the majority of the universe is stars and planets, and getting to understand that part of the universe in more depth and in a way that humans have never really been able to experience before, I
Right.
think is really special,
Yeah.
and part of why I do it.
Well, I don't know whether it may just be because I have a similar set of interests
Mm,
that so many of the people who figured prominently into my own philosophical as well as scientific understanding of the world
mhm,
uh, came from there. You know, I mean, Carl Sagan
right.
was a huge hero,
Yeah.
and I got lucky and married a woman who was able to talk him into coming
Mm,
to to speak at an event, um, and then she went on to run the or to start the foundation for the Krista McAuliffe Planetarium here in New Hampshire.
mhm.
Um, so anyway, and
Well,
of
yeah,
course,
I think you're absolutely right to bring up Carl Sagan as a hero. He's also a hero of mine, and I think one of the kind of, it's interesting because like I'm now trying to do more science communication myself. I have a small podcast that I'm working on with friends and other kind of projects that I'm working on. But even though his science is a little outdated because he was doing science like 20, 30 years ago now. And so if you read his books, some of that stuff's out of like not the common theory anymore. But what really pulls through is his humanity and his kind of understanding of the human experience in relation to these ideas. And I think that's something that like his activism and his humanitarianism like is it's kind of missing in a lot of modern science communicators, and something that makes his statements and his books just feel so real and lived because it's coming from this place of understanding people, not just the science.
Right. And so tell us more about your role at Hayden.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a postdoc researcher there, and so for those unfamiliar with the kind of career ladder in academia, you you go to school for way too long. I think I counted I was in 21st grade by the end of it because I had done 12 years of high school and then 4 years of undergrad and then 6 years of grad school or something. So I was like in 20th or 21st grade. Um and once you finish all that, it's not over yet. Then you kind of enter this what's called a postdoc. So you get your PhD, that's your doctorate, and then after that is the postdoc. And that you're expected to be doing research. Maybe you have a student that you're working with, like a graduate student that you're training in a way, or an undergraduate student. But the idea is that you are writing papers, and it's the publisher perish phase where you have to show off your skill as a scientist. And then you kind of do that for 2 years. You might do another one of those for 2 years. You might have to move between them, and then you start to apply for professorships. But I decided that I didn't really want to take that exact path. I think the publishing, the writing side of the science is the hardest part. It takes the most work, and it's very intensive, and it's not working with people. And that's part of the joy of like the Mowgli experience, was that I was working with people every day, and rather than just writing into a notebook. And so being at the museum is really great because there are a lot of education opportunities, and outreach opportunities as well. So I'm actually 50% of a postdoc. I asked to only have half my time be towards a postdoc. And so maybe moving away from that academic path so that I can focus more on education and outreach at the museum as well. So I also have 3 high school students that I meet with twice a week. They are my mentees in what's called the Science Research and Mentoring Program, which as an acronym is SHRIMP. And so we have the shrimp program, and I have these, I now have 6 cohorts of these students. So I've done it for 6 years. And now some of these students have graduated college themselves, which is a bizarre thing for me. But I work with them. I also teach this class to 2nd graders at the museum, which is like this astronomy kind of enrichment class. And that's very fun because we get to use the museum as our classroom and get to go into the halls. And we did the end of the year planetarium show where I fly the planetarium around, and we get to go through a digital universe all together, which is great.
Oh,
And so
that
I
sounds
do some of those. Yeah. So those are outreach events as well. Public programs puts on planetarium shows, and I do 2 or 3 of those a year as well, which is fun.
uh-huh. So much of your work is public facing.
Yeah, and that's deliberate, and I'm trying to do that as much as I can. I'm working into also like other places as well. For example, Scientific American, I have an article that I'm working on with them right now, which is
Great.
exciting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and like I said, I'm working on various other kind of media podcast stuff. It's a bit of a transition time right now. I feel like the postdoc is the most easy thing to understand about my job, and a lot of trying to figure out what the next steps could be in not a pure academic path for my career.
Yeah, it's interesting. Eh, there's a number of people who have um, who have Mowgli in common, who have found that the the role of education is really the most critical component of what they're doing. I mean, yeah, you have
Absolutely.
we just lost one of our Mowgli family members, Dan Dennett, who was one of the great philosophers in the
Mm.
world. I mean, he was
Wow.
considered one of the four horsemen of atheism, um, along with Richard Dawkins uh,
Yeah,
and
wow. I didn't realize he went to Mowgli. Cool.
Christopher Hitchens. Yeah,
Yeah.
he not only did he go to Mowgli, but he attributes the fact that he became a philosopher to something that Colonel Elwell said to him when he was a camper at Mowgli.
Gosh.
It's even in his Wikipedia. It doesn't mention the name of Mowgli, but it says, a counselor told him he should be a philosopher, and that's why he became a philosopher.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
and of course Colonel Elwell, he did his I think it was his doctoral dissertation
Mm,
about the role of camps.
yeah.
So I'm sure that that was sort of a natural place for you to fall into as you.
Oh yeah. Like I said, I think the reason I got my first job at the museum was because of the Camp Mowgli part of my resume, where I'm teaching science or I'm working, like whether it's the camping ribbon or whichever ribbon I was working on, like you're teaching to students in this natural setting, this informal setting. And
Yeah.
it's the best way to teach somebody or to learn with somebody. Like I think a lot of our education system is very focused on the tests and the grades, and I have been so fortunate to have almost decades now of experience teaching and never had to grade a single test. And that's what's great. Like at Mowgli, you're not grading the tests. I mean, they're doing some kind of something at the end to prove that they know their skills, but
Of
it's
course.
not nearly as formal. And I think that helps a lot of students in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a fellow named Tony Wagner who,
Mhm.
if you haven't read any of his education books, you definitely should look him up and learn more about him. But he was at Mowgli, and he is considered to be one of the great innovators and rethinkers of education in you know internationally.
Mhm.
And he talks a lot about how what Mowgli does is integrate all that learning. So
Absolutely.
it's a critical role. What's the article that you're working on with Scientific American? Can you tell us a little bit about what that?
Yeah, it's a big picture idea, but so it's kind of a summary of a paper that a friend is writing at New Mexico State University. And there's also going to be a podcast version of this that I'll be releasing separately. But the idea is the universe is a very big place. And it's mostly filled of galaxies with stars that we can see, but that's not actually most of the stuff. It's mostly dark matter and this dark energy and really cold gas that we can't see.
Mhm.
But all this gravity has the gravity between these things have shuffled them into a shape. And so the shape of the universe is what's called a cosmic web. And you can think of like a spider web, but then think of another spider web crossing it and another spider web crossing that. And you get this big three-dimensional tendrils of matter going off, and the galaxies are dotted along the strings. That's an important thing. And what these researchers did is the challenge is always describing the shape of this web, because while you can see the galaxies, you can't see anything else. And they needed to find something that could map the shape of this web really well if they just give it the galaxies. And what they realized was the best way to do this was using an algorithm that is based off of slime mold, which is this little, like, it'll be in the woods in at Mowgli for sure. It's this little orange, like bright orange glob of goo that
Mm-hmm.
is just like under the leaves. Just after it rains, it pops out and like wants to eat all the wet, decomposing leaves. But the way it searches around itself is really unique because it's a single-celled organism that is able to search in multiple directions at once. And I won't go into the cellular mechanics of it, but basically it searches really well over a space. And so these astronomers used this algorithm that somebody had made that replicated this pattern that the slime mold does, and it maps the cosmic web beautifully. It does the best job that any human algorithm is terrible compared to the slime mold algorithm.
Uh-huh.
And so that's essentially what this article is about. It's called The Slime Mold, the Size of the Universe. And it's how these researchers are using this bio-inspiration to further understand how the galaxies exist on this cosmic web.
Now, how in the heck did they come to that, to recognize
The
the
slime mold.
effect of the algorithm?
Yeah, so the slime mold is well known. It's kind of like uh a pet study, like a case study for a lot of people because it does solve problems very efficiently. The other well-known example is it loves to eat food, and so you could put food around its petri dish and it will go and collect it. But they decided, some scientists were like, what if we put the food in the shape of the Tokyo population centers? So this is basically the same kind of problem that if you were making a train system in Tokyo, you would want to connect the big population centers with a big train and then a smaller train to the other places. And they put down the oatmeal that was their kind of representation of the population centers down on this petri dish, and the slime mold recreates the Tokyo transit system almost perfectly because it is finding the most efficient route to connect these different samples. It's an incredibly intelligent, and you have to be careful because there's no brain or anything.
Right,
it's
right.
it's purely a kind of like biomechanical situation to connect these different places. And the astronomy analogy is, instead of oatmeal for population centers, we'll say galaxies, and we'll just let it connect the galaxies, and it's connecting it in the same way that the web does.
Fascinating.
It's a bizarre thing, and it's nothing to do with my research at all, which is fun for me. So I
So
get to learn something and share it.
what does your research focus on?
Hmm. Great. Yeah. So my research looks at how old stars are by how quickly they spin. And if you look up at the night sky, you might not realize all those stars have very different ages. And so if you look at, say, towards the Pleiades, which the Seven Sisters, you can see them with the naked eye, those stars are about 120 million years old, which is relatively young. And they are all going to be spinning at a certain rate, spinning around their axis. If you have younger things, they're going to be spinning faster, and older things are going to be spinning slower. And my job is essentially looking at a star, seeing how quickly it spins, and guessing how old it is because of that.
Why why do they spin slower as they,
Great.
I mean, I can tell
Yeah.
you why I spin slower. but, but is it the same reason?
Yeah, they slow down over time. Exactly. If you think about a top spinning on a table, right?
Mhm.
You give it some initial speed, it's
Yeah,
spinning quite fast.
yeah.
It slows down over time because of friction between the top and the table. That slows it down.
Mhm.
Um, there's no friction in space, but what is happening is an interaction between the stars' uh, winds, like the stellar winds coming off of it, like solar flares, essentially, interacting with its magnetic field. That takes energy away and slows down the star.
Uh-huh.
So it's this, like, every star has this process happen within it. The magnetic field kind of slows down from the wind, and that slows down the overall rotation of the star. So our sun takes about 30 days to go around once. And when it was younger, it was like 10 days. When it was really young, it was like 1 day. So,
Huh.
yeah.
So you're looking uh, at this from what I'm not going to ask you for the practical ramifications of this
Which I
because
don't think there are any. So we've
no,
already,
it's well, these are things that actually play out over a much longer period of time, right? I mean, uh,
absolutely.
things that Galileo discovered, uh, you know, centuries ago, uh,
Mhm.
probably do have some practical ramifications now, but it takes a
Yeah.
while. But the so is it considered purely theoretical what you're doing right now, or is there
My,
some?
yeah. Sorry, do you want to finish your question?
No, no, that's all right.
Okay. I would say so mine is definitely more observational. Like we're measuring individual stars and we're seeing how quickly they're spinning. There is a theoretical side which says, okay, you've measured this age of stars and this age of stars. Let's guess how it's gonna progress. Um, but I would say what one place that this comes into is if there's a planet around these stars, there's no good way to know how old a planet is, but this is a way to know how old the star is, and you can assume the planet's the same age as the star. And so that is a tool for understanding planets. I would also say that I think astronomy is really lucky in that there doesn't have to always be a practical application to our research. It very much feels like a pure science research in that regard. Like there isn't a kind of like, we need to solve this so that we can get 10% more efficient to help the budget in this way or whatever. So I definitely appreciate that and feel very fortunate to be in a field like that
Yeah, yeah.
compared to some of the other people who I like did my PhD with. They were working in like a material sciences lab and they were trying to make these batteries that they were working on just that little bit more efficient, which I think is rewarding. And they're probably going to get paid a lot more than me down the line, and that's totally fair for them. Um, but I do think that that's valuable about astronomy is that uh, it feels a lot like art in that way. It's a creative thing. You have to think about it a lot, uh, and there's going to be some result that is going to be interesting to think about, not necessarily practical to change somebody's everyday life.
And in your role, are you? I mean, do you? Is there? I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, so I'm going
Go
to
ahead.
stumble a bit.
Okay.
Your boss,
Yeah,
I assume Neil deGrasse Tyson is considered to be your boss, but maybe not. Maybe you could explain
I can
that
explain. Sure.
his role. But you know, he he does a lot of tweeting, if
Okay.
you will. And do you have to do that kind of stuff too, because you're public facing, or do you let him do it all and you worry about some of the other
That's a
important
great
stuff?
question. Yeah, so Neil is the director of the planetarium at the Museum of Natural History. I would say that he is less involved in the actual astrophysics department. Um, Day to day, I think he spends a lot of time on his own projects and then helping out the museum with some of theirs. Well, I think the day to day is run at the astrophysics department by we have four curators who are essentially professor level positions at the museum, and then also my advisor Jackie Faraday, and she's amazing in so many ways, but she is a position between education and astronomy at the museum, and is also an adjunct faculty at a few different places, including the City University of New York, where I got my PhD. And so, although Neil has been coming to the office more often, and he the other day was using me as an example of significant digits, wanted to talk about significant digits, and I thought I should mention every single digit in pi, and he decided that for the purposes of his story, that wasn't necessary. um but yeah, it's good to have Neil around. He is this very public figure, and yeah, we were talking about Sagan before. I think Neil does a lot for science communication right now as well. I think, like you said, he does tweet a lot. I think sometimes his tweets are a little pessimistic, or what's I think he spent a lot of time being pedantic about movies, and wanting to say that the science wasn't quite right in the movie.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, let's think of ways to get people excited about science, and not being the one who poo-poos the latest cool movie. I don't know if that's really helping us in that way.
Well, I think he's grown in stature in
Mhm.
his, since he began when he first kind of came onto the scene, he was, the comparisons with Sagan were, notable. And
Yeah,
I mean, you'd say, this guy isn't, he doesn't really have it.
yeah,
But over time, he
yeah,
has really grown into his role.
yeah.
And how do you see yourself progressing in this? I mean, what do you want to do 10 years from now?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, Wayne. You've caught me at an interesting time, because I've ended this PhD, which was quite a difficult thing, because this was a program that I was in for 6 years, and like, it was very clear what the next steps were for those 6 years. It was this test, and then it was this project and this project, and then it was drop everything and do nothing but write your dissertation for the next 3 months. And by the end of that, I was waking up, working nonstop for like 16, 17 hours, going to sleep, waking up nonstop. It was a very intense time in my life. This was last summer. um and then it ends, and then it's done. And then I it took me a while to realize what I was feeling, and the only language I could put it into was that it felt like a false summit. It felt like I was on this hike, and that I've been going up and up and up and up, and this was supposed to be the peak in some way, but it wasn't. There was now like years and years more work to do. Like, there was still more to do after this, and it felt like I was supposed to be at this top and I wasn't there. Which again, this false summit term came to mind, and one of the things that helped me get out of it was, oh yeah, when you're at a false summit, you still look back, you still see how high you've come up. Like, even if you're still not at the peak yet, you get to see how far you've come.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of been trying to do that for the last year or so, as I'm figuring out this transition. Like I said, didn't completely leave academia. Got this thanks to my amazing advisor, Jackie Faraday, who is open to me being this kind of part-time postdoc, where I'm like 50% this year, and next year I'll be sunsetting my science a little bit more, but working with students a bit more, which is good. Um, and so I do think that if I had the dream job, it would be something similar to what Neil is doing in this kind of like public space, science communication, as a way to interest the public, activate them around issues. And I think that um, obviously there's a lot of concern about the climate of the Earth, and uh, understanding that and being able to put that in applicable terms, I think would be a dream job for me, to be able to like work with people, and encourage and educate folks in that
Mhm.
way.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so that would be the way I'm trying to do that now, is still staying involved with the museum, working on building up various platforms and portfolios for science communication, and then we'll see where we go.
And so, uh, talk a bit about, what you took away. Excuse me, my dog is, I'm gonna get, hey, Cody. I guess he's not gonna calm down right away. Um, uh, I I want to turn for a few minutes
Please.
to the Mowgli philosophy and how that has impacted you, and what do you think are sort of the more important things that you took away from your experience at Mowgli, um, to become the person that you are?
Hmm. Wow, interesting. Um, where to begin? I think what's special about Mowgli, especially as a counselor, is that while there is like the kind of director and the assistant directors and stuff, at a certain point it feels very democratic in terms of or what do I want to say, uh, and horizontal leadership in a way. Once
Mm.
you are senior staff in that way, everyone's working together on the same thing. And I think being able to see that and see it really as a community, the space of not just staff, but also the junior staff and the campers themselves, like that's not a situation that one gets very often outside of life of
Right,
outside of that,
right.
and that everyone's really taking care of each other and working together in that way. And I think getting an example of that and the caring that comes from that in this camp experience was really valuable to me and something that I try and emulate with my own professional relationships uh, in that way. I think, yeah, I think the complete and total respect for the natural world around you is something that I carry with me every moment. um, although I live in this massive city, I couldn't live more than 10 minutes away from a park. And so if I walk outside my door, I could be in Prospect Park in 10 minutes.
Mhm.
And I notice myself smiling as soon as I get into that park. And let's be clear, it is a manicured, man-made thing. Like this is not the back, this is not the or the mountains, this is not the back country. Like this is a like there are roads, there's stones, but there's still turtles, there's still migratory birds, there are still trees growing, and spring is in the air right now as we're recording this. And so like having access to that nature, and I think also just realizing how important witnessing the natural world around you throughout the year, not just like any one season, but like seeing it grow and change is so important. And I think a lot of that came from those summers in Mowgli.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, you had grown up with an international perspective, but
Yeah.
um, this was this was definitely a
This was the first time I was in the same place for like 2 months at a time and having to go outdoors every single day and jump in a lake every single day. Oh my gosh, the dream. Getting to jump in a lake every single day.
yeah, yeah. It's funny. I talked with your Uncle Andrew um, a while back, and we were both saying that every morning at Mowgli you woke up and you said, "I can't believe they pay me to do this."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
That is, yeah, they say work a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life kind of
yeah, that's
thing.
right.
And look, there was work. There was work because you had a dozen 10-year-olds who didn't want to get out of bed, but at the same time, you're in this beautiful place and what do you have to do today? Be outside.
Yeah,
That's great. That's great.
right, right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, you mentioned
that
oh,
lesson that you just conveyed,
mm,
if you work a job that you love, you never really work a day in your life. And it kind of makes light of how difficult the job is sometimes, but at the same time, it really is. It's a truism, and Mowgli, I think, imbues that on many of us who have the experience of being there.
yeah. Yeah, and I think if you just hear that phrase naively, you're like, oh, okay, great, you never have to work. that's not really what it's saying. It's like it's saying that you're enjoying the work, that the
That's right.
work feels worthwhile and it feels important to do. And I think that those summers, like, yeah, maybe you're having a bad day, or maybe this one counselor or this one camper really doesn't want to get out of bed or is giving you some trouble or something, but there there's the potential to see them grow. There's the potential to see them change in some way, and getting to see a child, that's and part of the education stuff that I do at the museum now. I can see those moments that I can recognize a child like brightening and some spark growing inside of them, right? Their eyes light up, they figured something out for the first time. And I definitely had that experience first when I was at Mowgli, and teaching students there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, are you going to get up there this summer?
I'm working on it. So when I was a counselor there, especially, I remember one year I tried to do for a campfire say the entire history of the universe, and that was a mistake. That was a mistake. I'm realizing I probably did not convey most of what I wanted to do. And so I've been talking with I'm fortunate that I have good relationships still with Nick Robbins, the current director, with Jake Oliddy. He
Yeah.
was senior staff when I was there, and now he's assistant director too, and Tommy Greenwell as well, another assistant director. And so I'm working with all of them to come up for at least, hopefully, I would love to do another kind of like stargazing campfire, astronomy themed one. So hopefully a little bit later in the summer when it gets darker
All right.
earlier.
I want to be at that one. I'll make
Yeah,
make
yeah,
the
I'll be
trip
sure to let you know.
down to be at that one because I think it
Yeah,
would be a great pleasure and it would be nice to actually meet in person.
yeah, absolutely.
Mark
Um,
Popinchalk, thank you very much, my brother. And
yeah, yeah, yeah. Here, before we end, I did reach out to my uncles and my dad, and so I think Paul just wanted to say hi to everybody, and he's being very he's activated a lot around kind of the climate awareness, and he's doing a
yeah,
lot of really cool things. Andrew's in Colorado, and I think he wants to come on and do an episode. So please reach out to him.
okay,
But he's doing well. And my dad, Michael, is retired now. They live in the English countryside, but they visit Brooklyn fairly often because my sister and I both live here with their grandchildren, and so they're here right now, which is cool. But yeah,
that's
they all wanted to say hi to you and to say hello to the podcast folks as well.
terrific. All right, my friend, thank you very much for taking the time
Thank
to
you,
speak
Wayne.
with us.
This was
Good
fun.
hunting, good
Good
hunting,
hunting.
my
Yeah.
brother. Yep.
Clear
You take
skies.
care.
See ya.